As before, epoxy resin was used to glue the new pieces to the original stone, and in this case fiberglass dowels were used, since they are lighter and more flexible, and react better to the temperature changes that are characteristic of this tropical climate. The fragments glued previously were quite small and manageable, but these pieces were very heavy, and the process of holding them in position while they were fitted up again and again was no mean task, and called for great patience and endurance. It should also be remembered that as we worked on this statue, it was still always being venerated by the local people, and the feedback that was received and the enthusiasm with which this work was greeted by Cambodians from all walks of life brought home to us every day just how important this work really was, and how this really was much more than a restoration operation. Eventually the day came when all the hands were in position and we were ready for the return of the head. After some confusion as to its whereabouts, the head was found in the depot of the Royal Palace, and it was transferred to the museum. In February 2004, permission for its transfer to Siem Reap was granted, and we realized that the dream of so many people was really going to come true. The bureaucratic difficulties in getting approval for its return were potentially vast, but the importance to all the people of Cambodia meant that all parties to this operation made a special effort, and as our operations on the statue drew to a close, so the permission for the return arrived, and the operation was suddenly made possible. It was transferred in great secrecy and under close guard to the depot of the Conservation Office in Siem Reap. In fact, such was the secrecy of the transportation that the conservators only got confirmation of it when the head had already arrived in Siem Reap. There was very great excitement and a keen sense of anticipation among those who finally knew that the head was back and really would return to its rightful place. The administrative staff played a key role in this operation, as did the technicians from the museum in Phnom Penh who joined us, and throughout the morning the sense of excitement grew. It was indicative of the nature of this operation to note that while all the staff carried out their various tasks, they equipped themselves not only with the necessary paperwork and technical know-how, but also with incense and donations. This was not just the return of a piece of stone, but the return of the head of the most important image in the local pantheon, and everyone felt this deeply. This was a spiritual as well as technical operation, and the two elements went hand in hand, and if anyone had any doubt about this, by the end of the day they would need little convincing that as participants in this operation they had been witness to something quite exceptional and out of the ordinary. The escorts were prepared, and it was loaded in its special box onto a pickup for the last leg of its journey home. Apart from the technical and spiritual issues, it should also be noted that this is the first time that an artifact has been returned to the actual site at Angkor, and this is a very real indicator of the huge steps forward that have been made by the national and international authorities in ensuring the return of a state of security to the World Heritage Site at Angkor, and the conservation and evaluation of its heritage. As we began the journey through the town, we sat back and thought for a moment about how many people had been involved in this extraordinary task, and also how many people would really be touched by it. We had begun the research for the conservation of the statue when the APSARA staff had brought to our notice a crack in the shoulder, and now, nearly 3 years later, we were sitting in a motorcade watching the return of the head to Angkor Wat. We had set in motion an operation that had involved not just the conservators of our project, but the whole spectrum of Cambodian society, from the local villagers through to the ministers, and even members of the royal household. It was with a sense of great humility and enormous satisfaction that we sat back in the trucks and drove north towards the magnificent setting of the greatest temple in the world. However, even though we were conscious of the importance of this event, nothing had really prepared us for what awaited us at the temple. The transfer of the head had been carried out in great secrecy, as we already mentioned. In fact, we were only sure that the head would really be delivered on the same day as its arrival, so it was only then that we could really be sure that the next day it would at last return to the statue. Yet, as we drove through the temple complex, we became increasingly aware that here too there was a sense that something special was going to occur today. Of course the police and military were all ready and lined the route once we were inside the complex, but there was ferment in the pagoda as well, and as we drew up to the west gate we saw that the route was lined with members from the Conservation Authority, all with their hands clasped in veneration as the motorcade finally began the last meters of its journey. As the truck passed through the west gate and drew up in front of the sanctuary, we realized that, as so often in this extraordinary country, there was no such thing as a secret operation. Somehow the local community had found out, and overnight had prepared a ceremony that anywhere else would have required days of planning. It became clear that the technical operation of the reattachment of the head was now going to take rather longer than we had originally planned. We were no longer technicians in a restoration operation, but part of a religious and social experience that was never to be repeated, and was going to take as long as it took. As mentioned before, these were the users and proprietors of the image, and therefore this was their moment as much as it was ours. The box containing the head was unloaded from the pickup and taken to a position in front of the altar that had been specially prepared with flowers, incense and pig's heads. The technicians all made donations and lit incense at the altar, and then began the operation of the removal of the head from the box. The night before, the team had shrouded the scaffolding with a tarpaulin in order not to offend sensibilities as they removed the cement head in preparation. But now the main concern was that all the propitious rites be made prior to the reattachment. The head was perfumed and decorated with flowers, and speeches were made by the local dignitaries from the Conservation Authority, who, it must be said, were also taken completely by surprise by the ceremony, which they had specifically tried to keep quiet and discreet.